morning, and I think everybody knows me by now, Tristan Hydes. We're at the Build a Smarter Infrastructure, Invest in Critical Infrastructure, and I'd like to introduce the panel members. The first is Mr. Roy Del Carter. He's currently the Director of the Department of DEH, or Environmental Health. Oh man, this is hard. He has overall accountability for the functioning and management of the department, its budget, staff, strategies, and development. Mr. Carter provides technical advice to the Minister and the Ministry on environmental health functions, including food safety, premises, waste, and waste management. Additionally, Mr. Carter manages a quality control electronics. Sorry. This one's just as bad. Okay. Mr. Carter received a government scholarship and British Chevening Scholarship, wow, to complete his education. He completed a Bachelor's of Science degree with honors in environmental health from the Illinois State University in December 1995 and was a member of an honor society. Mr. Carter obtained a Master's of Science degree in occupational health and safety management from Brunel University in London. Mr. Carter, thanks. Move on. That's enough. And now I'm back to this one. You guys are torturing me. Ms. Christine Maltman. Since 2007, Ms. Maltman has been employed with Dart Realty as senior manager of project coordination. She's part of a team coordinating a variety of projects as part of the proposed 4 Cayman Investment Alliance, including the extension of the Esterly-Tibbetts Highway to Botabanu, the proposed waste management facility, and the remediation of the Georgetown landfill, and the proposed improvements to Public Beach. From 2003 to 2006, Ms. Maltman was employed by the Cayman Islands government, her most recent post being Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of District Administration, Planning, Agriculture and Housing. During her tenure at the ministry, Ms. Maltman was responsible for various subjects, including the following: planning appeals, lands and survey, district administration, MRCU, housing, telecommunications, environmental health, and the Government Office Accommodation Project. Prior to this, Ms. Maltman was Assistant Director of Planning at the Planning Department from 1994 to 2003. Ms. Maltman holds an undergraduate degree and master's degree in planning, as well as master in public policy administration. She's a certified planner with the Canadian and American Institutes of Planners. Ms. Maltman is also chairman of the Sister Islands Affordable Housing Development Corporation, a member of the Planning Appeals Tribunal, and past member of the National Roads Authority Board of Directors. She was also a member of the committee which reviewed the development and planning law, regulations, and planning processes, as well as co-chair of Vision 2008 Roundtable on Mitigating Disasters. Thank you, Ms. Hello. Thank you, Ms. Maltman. Mr. Tom Van Zanten, Deputy Director of the Cayman Water Authority. Tom joined the Water Authority in September 1984 when he was initially assigned as Associate Expert by the United Nations. Tom has more than 20 years' experience in the water supply and sewage field. In March 2005, he was promoted to Deputy Director, Engineering of the Water Authority. He is responsible for the new Works and Engineering Department and oversees the design, construction, and management of all new works in the areas of both water supply, production and distribution, and sewage collection and treatment. Thanks, Tom. Ms. Gina Ebanks-Petrie, the Director of the Department of Environment. Gina Ebanks-Petrie is the Director of the Department of Environment, where she currently describes her job as challenging but never boring, and says she feels extremely privileged to lead such a competent and dynamic team who are passionately committed to the conservation of Cayman's biodiversity and natural environment. Thanks, Ms. Gina. Louis Boucher is the Deputy Director of the Electricity Regulatory Authority, ERA. Mr. Boucher holds an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering and Masters of Business Administration, concentrating in corporate finance and operations management. He's a registered professional engineer and has experience working at both public and private multinational organizations. Mr. Boucher brings to the ERA experience in project and operations management, as well as the evaluation of capital investments decisions on the utilities and power generation sectors. He has led and managed the analysis of renewable energy projects from a technological, environmental, and financially viable standpoint. Thank you, Mr. Boucher. Mr. Miguel Jakes, Senior Policy Officer, Ministry of District Admin, Works, Lands, and Agriculture. He holds a bachelor degree in Management Information Systems and has worked at the Computer Services Department as an Oracle programmer, system analyst at Deloitte, and has now served with our ministry, DOLA, for 2 years as Senior Policy Advisor, and at the previous ministry for another 2 years. Mr. Dean Brady, General Manager, Home Gas and Trenchless Technology. Mr. Brady is the General Manager of both Home Gas and Trenchless Technology, and was drawn to the propane industry for more than 20 years ago when he became interested in alternative ecological sources of energy. Specializing in underground directional boring and drilling, Trenchless Technology is also at the forefront of the safest, less disruptive ways to continue building in the infrastructure of Cayman. Today, both companies continue to bring environmentally cost-effective technologies to the marketplace. Mr. Brady is an alumni of the Leadership of Cayman and serves on the international MPGA, National Propane and Gas Association, Board of Directors, the MPGA Benchmarking Council, Renai Partners Committee, the NFP organization, and on the MPGA Member Services Committee, all which enable him to stay up to date with the accelerated changes in affecting the propane industry today. Thanks, sir. And last but not least, Mr. Richard Hugh is President of the Caribbean Utilities, President and CEO, sorry, of the Caribbean Utilities Company, Grand Cayman. After graduating from University in Florida, if I knew that, let's skip him. With a Bachelor's of Science degree in Electrical Engineering in 1988, Mr. Hugh immediately joined CUC and held various engineering and management positions, while rising to his present position as CEO in 2005. In 1997, he obtained the degree of Masters of Business Administration at Wilfrid Laurier University, Ontario, Canada. Mr. Hugh is a registered professional engineer in the state of Florida and serves as director of the Newfoundland Power and the CARILEC, the Association of Electric Utilities in the Caribbean region. Thanks. Thank you all. I have a little spiel, I guess, before we start. My time for my soapbox. Waste management and energy are two highly debated topics in Cayman right now. Both have a significant and direct impact in our way of life, and as Cayman tries to keep pace with the rest of the world, we have to find new ways to collaborate, to forge alliances that will take us well into the future. For too long, we've practiced a degree of protectionism while on the frontier of capitalism, and if we could just find that synergy, that right balance of cooperation between entities, we would not only see gains in our profit margins, but we'd advance our country as a whole. The first, there are two sections up here today. We're going to discuss waste management and energy policy. All the panel members are up here, and I think we can say that if anybody wants to jump in, feel free. But the first off for about a half an hour is going to be waste management. And with that, the first question I have is to Mr. Van Zanten. What is the current state of sewage and sewage management and treatment infrastructure. Are there any upgrades scheduled? Have budgets been allocated and approved? And is there any update possible for the sale of this asset?
Thank you. Well, as you're all aware, the public sewer system is relatively small in Grand Cayman. Originally, it extended just from the public beach in from the cemetery in Georgetown all the way up to the public beach, and that was constructed in the late '80s. And since then, we have done a few extensions into new developments. The treatment plant that treats all the wastewater was originally waste stabilization ponds, which was a low-tech type of technology. And we figured that with the explosive growth that we had and the anticipated growth in the future, that we needed to do something more compact. So in the year 2005, we actually completed a new state-of-the-art sequencing batch reactor plant. First phase out of 4. The first phase, each phase is 2.5 MGD. Once we have the whole thing fully built out, we can treat about 10 million gallons a day, which is approximately what we anticipate the total waste flow in Grand Cayman being in about 10, 15 years, obviously depending on the growth. Any upgrades? The first thing obviously was the treatment plant, because we figured that we need to expand the treatment capacity before we can actually expand our collection system. So we've done the treatment plant. We're now looking at solving some of the issues that we have with the existing collection system. We have some infiltration, and as our entire system is below groundwater table in the groundwater along West Bay Road is saline. We have some issues with corrosion. So we looking to invest about $3 million over the next 3 years renovating some of those problem areas. We typically work within the authority for all of our capital projects on a multi-year plan, which is constantly updated. And, because one of the things that we have to do is we will have to construct all new works and live within our means, as it were. So we are limited by what kind of revenue we have. Just to give you an example, on the wastewater side, we haven't had a rate increase since 1995 until the recent rate adjustment. In addition to that, we never had, like we did on the water supply, a method of correcting for the increased cost of electricity. And we actually went from about $40 to $100 a month for the treatment of the wastewater to about $1,000, sorry, for $40 a day to about $1,000 a day just for that. So with the new rate adjustment, we are much better equipped to set aside some revenue in order to do the most needed upgrades. With regards to the possible sale of the assets, as you are aware, government has directed that the wastewater asset need to be sold. We try that at the moment for various reasons. The sale is presently on hold.
Thanks. And don't mean to put you too on the spot, but and keeping it sort of general, and for those developers out there, how viable is the expansion of the sewage?
Okay. One of the issues that we have with collection of wastewater, it is a very expensive undertaking. Typically, the cost of water is about 1/3 to produce water, and to distribute the water is probably 1/3 to 1/4 of the cost of collecting and treating wastewater. So I mean, the ballpark figure is probably, if you take everything into consideration, pump stations, infrastructure, treatment capacity, probably talking about $1 million for every mile of pipeline that you have to install. When the Water Authority initially did the collection system along West Bay Road, that was the highest developed area. Parts of Georgetown probably be as highly developed, as densely developed, so you got a lot of customers in a very short tract of land. However, we have a lot of customers in areas that really need the better sanitation, but unfortunately those are also the areas where the customers are most likely very hard pressed to pay the rates that need to be paid in order to cover the cost.
Thanks. That leads to a sort of a tricky proposition, but we'll try and save that actually, because I wanted to open it up to the public on it. I think we're going to move on a little bit to the solid waste management. Mr. Carter, what is the estimated timeline for the continued use of the Georgetown landfill?
That is a fairly, I guess, straightforward response on that in terms that it could be from perhaps a few years to forever. Having said that, let me see if I can put that in some kind of a perspective. In 2002, when I became the director of the Department of Environmental Health, the landfill was projected to close, I think, that same year. And we had to change a number of practices in terms of what we were doing at the landfill to maximize the actual operations. And some of those things that we did were to implement recycling programs and to divert a number of items from the landfill, in particular a lot of the scrap metals and household appliances and so forth. Because prior to that time, a lot of that was being disposed of within the actual landfill itself. Also, with the whole thing of whether it will be 2 years or 3 years may well depend on a policy issue with regards to a proposal that is currently on the table with the government and what the final outcome of that will be. And when I say forever, really, if you know, there's nothing, or if that falls through, or if there's some issues with that, then we'll have to continue to operate at the existing site for many years. And having said that, I mean, it will involve a number of changes. It will involve a whole set of engineering aspects. It would, the management processes would further change, and we'll have to be looking towards some advanced technologies and so forth to really support the infrastructure going forward. So on that basis, and summarizing it in that basis would be how I would frame that particular response at this time.
Okay. I don't know if Ms. Maltman you want to add anything to it based on the discussions that are now ongoing with government?
Sure. Just picking up from Mr. Carter's point on the proposal before government, which has been proposed by DART Realty. We have been working very closely with government, including Mr. Carter and his team at Department of Environmental Health, to understand what's going on there, as well as based on a number of studies over the last decade or so, mostly commissioned by government, have led to our proposal, which is to site a new facility in a remote location. We're currently going through the technical review process, the environmental impact assessment for that. Our view is that the existing operations at the Georgetown landfill, while they're much improved under Mr. Carter's administration, given their constraints, they've had to make do with the site and undertake different waste management practices. We understand that, and our view is that that's not a long-term solution. So we're presently working with the government for a longer-term solution.
Okay. Kind of leading into that, I think it's pretty clear by now, I think, that government has taken a policy to remediate and cap the Georgetown landfill if all goes as planned. The 110-acre site and Breakers and Midland Acres have been identified as the most suitable site. What's the next step in this process, and when can we expect to receive some sort of decision? again, I think either of you can.
What I'll do, I'll make a comment and I'll bring in Ms. Petrie Banks
Sure.
to comment on this process. But certainly, I mean, I don't think that the policy itself has been made as to remediate cap and close. I think what has happened there is that there's a proposal to the government and which a decision or policy will eventually be made. But there is certainly the exploratory situation going on in the partnership between the four Cayman Alliance. So I just want to point that out at this stage. The site, yes, it's 110 acres that has been proposed as part of the overall development of a new waste management facility. And what it would allow for, or this proposal for the waste management facility would be a facility that would be lined and it would meet a number of the international standards for what a properly engineered landfill should operate as. And I will stop at this point here just to bring in Ms. Petrie so that she can add perhaps some comments about where we are currently with this. And I know the existing Georgetown landfill, in terms of remediation of that site, there's still ongoing discussions, but I'll allow Ms. Petrie to follow up at this point.
Thank you. I suppose I'm going to start my comments by sort of pulling in comments from Roydell and Christine. My concern, I guess, at this point is that as a country, we don't have a solid waste management strategy or policy that's been sort of nationally agreed. And you've heard Roydell respond to the question about the siting of the proposed facility as a proposal rather than a policy. And I think this gets to the crux of my concern as the director for the Department of Environment, which is that, I mean, I think that really what we're doing here is following a process that allows us to have some agreed national policies about waste management and how we're going to approach waste management in an integrated way. So are we going to have policies that, for example, promote waste reduction, either through packaging regulations or some other kind of incentives to make that possible? Recycling, of course, is another area where I think we need to have some very clearly thought out policies in terms of what are we going to prioritize in terms of recycling. How much does that cost the government? Is it cost effective? Are there opportunities for public-private sector partnerships in this regard, et cetera? And then we can start to integrate proposals like the DRCL proposal, because they're being integrated in a framework that has been agreed nationally. And I think some of the current sort of debate over, is it a good thing, is it a bad thing, is because we're operating in an environment where there really isn't an overall national policy. Having said that, the government took some policy decisions in respect of the waste management facility in Bodentown and asked the Department of Environment to basically guide an environmental impact assessment process for the environmental impact assessment that's going to be carried out on the proposed waste management facility at the site in Bodentown. So we're at a stage now where we have agreed draft terms of reference for that environmental impact assessment with DRCL and the consultants who have been selected to carry out the EIA. And those terms of reference are out now for public consultation. So I would definitely urge everyone to either log on to the DRCL, the DART website, or the Four Cayman Investment Alliance website, or the DOE's website, where you can access the terms of reference. Have a look at them And please do provide us with your comments. You have until the 29th of this month to actually give us comments on the draft TOR. There will be another opportunity for public review once the terms of reference have been finalized and the EIA has been carried out. Then the consultants will report the results of the environmental impact assessment through an environmental statement, and that draft statement will also go out for public review. So you will be notified when that's available, and hopefully we'll have some public comments on that as well. So that's the extent of my knowledge and where we're at on that, in this process.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gina. Just picking up on that, if anyone's interested, I've got a couple of handfuls of copies of the draft terms of reference. If you'd like to take a copy today, happy to share those with you. And from DRCL's point of view, the environmental impact assessment and the resulting environmental statement is going to help us in our planning and permitting applications for the proposed waste management facility, which is why we're conducting it in advance of submitting a planning application. We've got no facility construction at the site, and we won't do anything at the site without the necessary permits and approvals being in place.
What's the next step after all of that? Roydell, Christine?
I think, yeah, well, I'll say this, I mean, and Christine just spoke about that. I mean, for us, this is an ongoing process. I mean, Christine will speak a little more about where they are, but I think as was initially discussed, was that the terms of reference are on the table now for comment. And then once that period closes, I think it's on the 29th of this month, then those will be incorporated, and further discussion will take place on that. But again, with that specific thing, again, DRCL or EVANX, Peter can take that up. But certainly, I mean, there will still be ongoing discussion, because with the aspect from an operational point of view and from a layout of the facility, all of those things the Department of Environmental Health specifically will be involved with, whereas right now there's a joint EAB team that's looking at all of these things so that they're dealt with comprehensively at the very beginning rather than individual at the departments. But Ms. Petrie may want to pick up on the aspect there as to what next in terms of the TORs, if you may just...
Well, in terms of the TOR, like I said, we're waiting for public input until the 29th. And then once that public input has been received, the comments are going to be gathered, and there will be a consultative process where we look at the comments that have been offered by the public, the three teams, DRCL, the EAB, and I should just say that in terms of membership of the EAB, it's the Department of Environmental Health, the Water Authority, the Planning Department, the National Roads Authority, the Petroleum Inspectorate, and the Department of Environment. I chair the group, and we basically it's a mechanism to coordinate the government's input to the process. Those are all of the technical departments that would normally have a role in the decision-making processes around whether it's planning or giving advice to the CPA, et cetera.
I think what I was trying to get at, I'm sort of assuming that a lot of you came back from the earlier session, and what I was trying to get at was the fact that, you know, it is, while again the public doesn't see a lot of things or may not know of a lot of things happening, things are happening behind the scenes, and they are important intricacies that are necessary, that and we have to cross those bridges, so to speak, before we can just see an actual project materialize. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at. I don't expect timelines or anything. Waste to energy, is that something that is possible or viable? And
for me, it is possible, and there are different sort of opinions and assessments on that, and some of it is perhaps just opinions and so forth. But I would say this, that whatever process, we're actually looking for integrated waste management program systems here in the Cayman Islands. And it would be that you will still require a lined landfill. That is absolutely necessary. We will still need to have that regardless of what solution that we come up with. I believe that having a waste-to-energy facility complemented with recycling components, proper management of hazardous waste materials as well, will be of benefit to the islands. Now, when we speak of waste-to-energy, I think traditionally we have looked at huge plants that sprawl across several acres, and you have smoke and emissions emitting into the environment. Now, with the advancement of technologies over the many years, a lot of those issues have been resolved. A lot of the plants are much smaller, and they are modular in components. And it would be a system that would be on a modular basis with expansion capabilities. We start small, and then we expand as the demands are there. The other important thing when it comes to waste to energy is that we must bear in mind that the primary purpose of that is not to generate and supply, a whole lot of megawatts to the grid, although if we could achieve that, that would be ideal. But the first is to reduce the volumes, because, and you can get up to a 90% volume reduction on waste to energy. So if it is that we're looking at volume reduction, because the current situation that we have at the existing landfill, which is about 30 years old, and you see the height of that, the volume of that that's there. Even if we get a new facility going forward, and we continue along the same practices, while we'll have a properly engineered landfill, we would continue to essentially dispose and cover the waste. Waste to energy will reduce that volume, and you would have ash, which some of that can also be recycled and into products that could perhaps be used locally. So I certainly believe that we should be working towards waste to energy, and there are different technologies like I mentioned before, and there are more innovative technologies. One of the other drawbacks that people may have with that, and I'll be brief here, is that they say that once you go to waste to energy, you may reduce your recycling efforts, but I don't necessarily agree with that. On an island, we have to ship all of these items overseas. It's really difficult to manage them. It's an expensive operation. So all of the non-recyclable items, I think we should be able to generate some energy in the form of either electricity or some other form. But I believe that it is viable, and it's an option that will need to be considered with whatever solution there is that's being proposed, at least at a different stage.
Thanks. Mr. Hugh or Mr. Boucher, I don't know if you guys have any comment.
Okay, I'll take the question. The CUC would be obviously willing to take the electricity from a waste-to-energy plant. And we've had, over the years, various discussions with various entities who were proposing waste-to-energy, and I don't think there's an issue there. I think the issue has been, and Mr. Carter's sort of mentioned it, is that if you were looking to justify it on the basis of selling electricity and making it a viable project on selling electricity alone, it's not going to be viable because of the large investment that's required. But if you factor in the benefits of reducing the waste going into the landfill, and then perhaps, on that more soft analysis, if you like, it is viable, and it ensures that 20 years from now we don't have the same problem at a different location.
Excuse me. The National Energy Policy, the subcommittee, when we get into the National Energy Policy portion, I'll try and give you all an overview of how the main committee was broken up into subcommittees. But the subcommittee, which deals with electricity, renewable energy, water, and wastewater, discussed waste energy, and it was the opinion, the recommendation of the subcommittee to the main committee that waste energy is a viable. One of the advantages of waste energy is it's a firm, reliable power. Unlike solar or wind, which is intermittent and there's issues with storage, there's no issues with storage in waste energy. So it solves really two things. It produces electricity, and it manages the waste, the social unpleasantness of the landfill. The main committee hired a consulting firm to also evaluate all the subcommittee's works, and they too were of the opinion that approximately 5 megawatts could be produced from Cayman's waste. So, yeah.
Well, leading into energy, let's go there for a little bit. The vision of the Cayman Islands energy sector in the long term is to be an efficient, diversified energy sector, supported by informed public behavior within the Cayman Islands, which provides secure, reliable, and affordable energy in an environmentally sustainable manner. This may seem like a lofty goal for a country that exclusively rely on fossil fuels. What are the steps, or what steps will be needed to put in place to initially in your view, to reduce the use of fossil fuels?
Looking at me.
I'm going to lay it right on you.
Well, to give everyone an overview of the National Energy Policy Committee, there are 4 subcommittees that have been appointed. There's one that deals with electricity, renewable energy, water, and wastewater, one that deals with petroleum products and transportation, another one which deals with buildings, construction, and land use, and another one which deals with public education. They're all important. I think the steps that need to be taken, as much as this is a policy from government, it's also, to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, it has to come from the bottom up as well. People have more power than they think, pardon the pun, but they can take steps in terms of reducing their air conditioning. It's amazing what 1 degree difference would make on your thermostat. I think it works, depending on the size of your home, it could work out to 100 or 200. Yeah, maybe that should be the first step, is to reduce the thermostat in here. Another thing that Cayman has not explored too heavily, well, it has explored it, but it's just not being implemented on the mass level, as solar water heaters. Everybody talks about producing electricity from sun, but one of the main energy from sun is heat. And to heat water, the average residential consumer will consume, it'll be anywhere from 7 to 15% of their monthly bill just to heat water, depending on how they control their water heater. So really, it's not only electricity, it's the types of cars we buy, how we build our homes, the types of air conditioners we use, higher efficiency. I could pass it on to...
Well, Tristan, if I could jump in. Said initial step for reducing fossil fuel. Forums like the Future of Cayman, education and information, like Louis just led into educating the public of ways of conserving electricity. Energy efficiency is probably one of the cheapest way of reducing fossil fuel. So,
let me just add a little bit to that, because I think it's broader than what we're speaking about right now. And I think it does have to start from the bottom up. You hear a lot of talk in the community about putting the windmills and the big solar panels. But we as a country don't have the populace to support the infrastructure. Even if you go to the private sector, you know, you look at it as a building block for a business. You know, you have to be able to fund it. You know, investors aren't going to invest unless there's a return. But there's many of things that we can do today. You know, we as a country hired Castalia to do our policy and give us suggestions in which way to go. But everybody looks to the government to do this and put this in place when they got to look at themselves and say, hey, you know, how can I do this? But, you know, conserving, you know, our ecology and building our environment and reducing our fossil fuel starts with each one of us. There is things that we can do, we can buy on the market that aren't so expensive that helps us cut back on the amount of fossil fuels that we use. You know, take the solar heating. You know, I'm a fan of solar to some degree, but solar can get expensive on either side of the book. You know, going to electric cars, you know, it's a great asset to have, but in our populace, how does it really help us, you know, get around? There's things that we need. We will always be dependent as a country on a certain amount of fossil fuels because our populace doesn't allow us to afford to support the infrastructure that's needed to grow a huge solar PV, you know, on east end of the island to generate half the electricity for the island. Our populace doesn't let us support the financial infrastructure to do a huge geothermal. But the waste to energy is something viable on many levels that we can do today to start. I mean, using alternative sources of energy. There's been a lot of talk about CNG. You know, it goes around, but really nobody knows the depth of the cost of the infrastructure to build a CNG plant in the Cayman Islands, let alone the economic or ecological impact it will have in our environment. But we, as a country, have the knowledge, we have the financial backing to look at some of the lower income or lower cost ways to save on energy. You know, using the propane, using the CNG is great, but conserving as a whole, it's like we talked about in here, you know, it's like 58 degrees in here. It's all great. But this is all hydronic cooling. So the cost to generate this cooling is not the same amount of money as it costs to generate cooling by electricity. And that's where through education and training that we as this, you know, future of Cayman need to get this education out to everybody else. But we need to foster this by being the leaders and use it ourselves. But there is smaller forms of this alternative energy out there that we can use individually that is affordable to help offset the higher cost of energy in Cayman. But we take it back, you know, just for our vehicles, buying smarter. But before we buy smarter, we've got to improve the quality of the fuels that come into the Cayman Islands. You know, the ultra low sulfur diesel for vehicles, the addition of propane fumigation on our existing diesel vehicles. You know, let's just take the bus service, our form of transportation right now. It's horrendous, okay? And that's something that we can talk about later in the transportation side of the NEP. But just in the bringing to some kind of ecological plateau to improve the emissions, you know, you can put propane fumigation on it. You could do CNG. You know, there is opportunity. You can get additives you can buy off the shelf that improve the emission quality that comes out of the vehicles. But I think if we go back as a country and force them to change up what we do, as far as how we buy, what we bring in, then we can get the better vehicles in Cayman. But there's no one silver bullet that's going to control what we do because we don't have that populace. I mean, you look at your bills now, what it costs to live in Cayman, based on the per capita person there is, you can't break it up anymore. We can't depend on government to supply us with cheaper energy. We can't depend on government to build us better homes. It's the technology that the group of people that sit in here, that sit on this panel, can afford everybody that are going to make a better Cayman for the future.
Thanks. And I think there's, what this tells us is there's two sides to the equation, and one side of that is the consumer that she has to play a very important role. Mm-hmm. For CUC, I'm not trying to advocate, but you know, we all at the end of the month jump on CUC and say, this is how much my bill is. But truthfully, your bill's not going to be that high if you don't spend it, or if you were a little more efficient about it. And in all credit to them, they've been, for the probably last 20 years, I've heard them, you know, with that little slogan, and you've got the power. So, so from that side, if we were a little bit more efficient, we could probably be reducing or help reducing or improving our environment as well.
If I could.
Could I just have a...
Sure.
Thanks. Just to say that in terms of the national energy policy, I mean, from my perspective, I think it's a good thing that as a country we've actually recognized the need to create a national energy policy. I think that there, just as Dane said, there's not one silver bullet to reduce carbon emissions or to reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. And so we have to be comprehensive in our approach. We need to look at land use, the way we plan our communities, transportation, our road network, whether we're going to, you know, move towards some kind of bus system or some kind of mass transit system, et cetera. And then also to look at energy efficiencies in the way we build, in the types of sort of infrastructure we put in our buildings, et cetera. But also to then put incentives in place for renewables to be incorporated into developments, large developments, homes, et cetera, not just at the sort of commercial level. So I do think that the policy, because I sat in one of those subcommittees, and I actually sit on the NEP as well, the policy is attempting to be comprehensive, and I just really hope that when we get the draft policy, that we can also have it taken out to public consultation, which I believe is the plan, and that we will get the support necessary to actually have it adopted by government, and it will serve as a framework, as a guide moving forward for the way that we sort of operate in Cayman in respect of energy generally.
Yeah, I think
we covered the 4 questions.
Yeah, I think we covered all of them actually. But, so I was going to open it up. I was going to open it up to the public. So I don't know if who wants to hit us first.
Hi, morning. Mrs. Ebanks, Petrie mentioned that there was no national waste management policy. Question comes in 2 parts. Can the panel, anybody, probably the civil servants, confirm who's responsible or accountable for putting this together and over the years for failing to do so? Second question would be, if we accept that elected officials come and go, but we have a DOE Oh, that's all right. If we accept that the elected officials come and go, but we have a Department of Environment, a ministry responsible, and several senior civil servants in the process, shouldn't we have this in place? Because we've been talking about the same issue from about, what, 1992, and that just boggles my mind as to how we're still having that conversation.
Well, you go ahead, Ryder.
Let me respond to that, and just for a bit of clarity. I think, well, perhaps there's not a national policy in terms of how we go out and do the health policy, or that you're currently doing your energy policy. It does not mean that there's not a policy in which we would regulate or how you would want to deal with waste management. The ministries in the past have always had that policy, and the broad policy is basically that we require that to have a integrated, comprehensive waste management solution. That is a broad policy that's adopted by the ministries over the years. And in addition to that, much work has been done, as you are also aware, from 1992 that there were a number of reports and research and all of those kind of things that were completed. And basically, I mean, I've been involved in several of those reports, and you know, the reports are done and the information is there, and really what needs to happen. And of course, a lot of it comes down to the cost and so forth, but the broad policy is there. And who is responsible? Like I said, the various ministries over the year, but the policy has always sort of been in place. So I just want to clarify from that point. But I would say that there have not been such broad base as going out to the public like you did with the energy policy or the health strategic policy and so forth. But components of the waste management also roll into those different policies.
And just to pick up on that, I guess I should be on that side of the fence, is that, you know, the ministry is considering doing it. This is the ministry that's responsible for it now, and we're looking at it. The energy policy was one of the first ones in place, or it's going to be one of the first ones in place. And but it's we're developing. That's why we're called the developing nation, I guess. We can't do everything one time. And I don't mean that in any facetious way or anything like that. It's the reality of it. And but I think we are working towards it, and I think we should be recognized for trying to work towards it. Anybody else?
Hello, just one follow-up.
Yeah.
Reading, you know, following in the press and everything, it gets really confusing. Who's driving the current machine with regards to dealing with the solid waste management proposals? Is it the government and the policymakers within the ministry or the department, or is it the developer? Because that is still very much unclear.
I think it's a combination. I think both are in the seat, and they're in the car together, and they're collaborating. It's we had numerous meetings over the last year and a half, 2 years, and we are all diligently working at this.
Can I just say, in terms of the waste management policy, I understand what Roydell says, that there's a sort of a broad policy. What I was referring to was more of a comprehensive document that would look at, you know, the various options available to us in terms of our waste management strategy. Probably look at costs, capital costs, and operational costs associated with implementing all of those various options, so that, you know, as a country we could have some sort of benchmark or guideline against which to judge proposals that come into the country, and have a better idea of how those proposals fit in to our overall policy. That's what I was talking about when I said there wasn't a sort of a nationally accepted policy on waste management, and I stand by that. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, that there is, and I think, Tristan, you acknowledged that the ministry's looking at working on it, but my comment stands, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think...
Could I ask a question slightly off the subject, but it bothers me quite a bit. I'm Tommy Bodden, an endangered species here.
Endangered species?
Why can't we adopt or use yellow paint on the center line for two-way traffic? If you look at all the streets, almost 90% or maybe more, look like one-way streets here. And I think it's very confusing, not only for visitors, but for residents. You got to think twice when you see a dotted line, whether it's a broken line, whether it's two-way traffic or for two-way traffic or for one-way. And I think some time ago I questioned it, and it was something about the law would have to be changed in order to use yellow paint instead of white. I think it's time to find out how we can do that and get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I mean, just to note, I mean, we are the Ministry for Works as well, which includes traffic. So, and the law has just been changed, and
Used in some places.
Yes, we worked very hard. That's a huge law, and I know there's some paint change in there, but I can't tell you what. But I will take it up.
I believe that the size of solar panels are very limited under the present regulations and Energy Regulatory Authority. I recently did a study, and I believe that in big installations, solar energy could be produced for about 21 cents per kilowatt hour, which is about half of what we pay CUC. But the system is that big projects can't use solar energy because under the present regulations, they're not permitted to do so. So I think what we're doing, a major source of alternative energy is being limited because of the present regulations that we do have. And to go on to another subject too, I think in big projects, geothermal, cooling for air conditioning would be a system that should be encouraged. I know that everybody is saying that we should save on how we use energy, and that's quite true, but I really believe too that we could look at alternative sources that work very, very well and would save not only the importation of fossil fuels, but would also be more economical to use.
One of the first draft electricity policies being presented to Cabinet is exactly that. It's to maintain and improve utility regulation for renewable energy. If you read the law under general regulatory principles, anybody can generate with renewables for self-supply, which means if you're not connected to the grid, you can basically produce as much solar power as you want. But the question is it going to be economically, is it going to make economic sense for you to do so? I mean, maybe for the Shetty Hospital, but for a...
But in many projects I look at, it's viable. The problem is that if you have to be 100% on solar to do that,
you need storage.
Which eliminates the use of big solar systems, which can save a lot of fuel, and it's also very economical to run.
Yes, sir.
Can I add
Go
to
ahead.
that?
Yes.
I'm not sure what regulation or law you're talking about that's restricting, but under our license, CUC's license, there are various parts of that where it encourages the use of renewables. And approximately a year ago, we went out to the public for a public tender for large projects, up to 13 megawatts of renewable projects. We had some very good proposals, competitive around the price that you were talking about. And we are currently negotiating with 2 suppliers to bring large solar onto the grid. That's a competitive process. We don't want to take renewables that are over the avoided cost of fuel, and because that will push, in large scale that is, that will push the overall cost of electricity up for all consumers. There's also a technical restriction with respect to intermittent supplies like solar and wind. Obviously, we have an obligation to provide continuous, high-quality electricity service to all consumers. And if you have a large block of something like wind or solar that is too large for the system, we will have fluctuations in voltage, perhaps frequency. And so our approach is to take the 15 megawatts. We hope to have 2 megawatts from small renewable suppliers, residential customers, commercial customers who put solar panels or small wind turbines on their premises, 2 megawatts from that source, and 13 megawatts from large-scale solar. Some of the proposals we've seen up to 5 megawatts, for instance, of solar panels on large lots of land. We'll start with the 15 megawatts, hopefully by 2014, early 2015, we can have that 15 megawatts in place, and we'll see what impact it has on the system and grow from there.
Can I just add one thing that's generalized to all of alternative fuels that I'm really surprised that nobody has asked a question yet. But, you know, we as a country, I keep saying this because it's everybody that's in this room, have to look at the impact that alternative fuels carry. Now, when I say this, because we talk about renewable, what is the true definition of the word renewable? You know, we talk about solar. You know, where do you dispose of a solar panel? Because it does have toxic materials inside. Where do you dispose of the highly toxic batteries when they fail? We do not have a disposal source in the Cayman Islands for the used up alternative materials that we use. We're only looking at one side of it. I'm a firm believer in solar for generating electricity, but I see enough car batteries sitting out in the mangroves on the side of the street, sitting in somebody's backyard. I see used motor oil because they don't take it to the landfill for disposable. Well, let me tell you, our ecosystem is so delicate. The waters around Cayman are pristine because we really don't have runoff. We don't have ditch systems that take our rainwater to the sea. But I can tell you, sure as we're all sitting here, we take a few of them high deep cell gel pack batteries, whatever they're called, for solar, and dump them into the different areas of Cayman. You're going to start to see our ecological system die. And then what do we have?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we got to think about how we dispose of what's left in the solar panels.
Yeah, my name's Gary Austin from IBM, and I want to ask a question and frame the question around what is the theme of a smarter infrastructure. I haven't heard it discussed, but I'd be curious to see where smart shows up in your national energy policy, and I'll give you a couple of examples because we're working with most of the Caribbean countries right now are working on a national policy or have one, working very heavily with Jamaica who have one and have embraced smart. And so the question comes, and I'll use a couple of examples in the case of water, smarter water. And the example is if you use fossil fuels to create water and you lose 60% of it through non-revenue water leakage and bad pressure management, that says if we had sensors and we did it smart, we might do things differently and save things and cut down on costs and such things. If we look at beyond that to a national energy policy that looks at the factors that go into transport, electric cars, and build that infrastructure so those electric cars become part of the grid and feed back into the grid. So that affects transportation policy, not just energy policy. If we look at communications policy, if we build a smart grid, it has a direct reflection on your bandwidth, as in broadband for the nation, which is a hot topic for everyone. So where is the communication strategy that deals with this? If we then take it to the most visible one, which we don't spend a lot of time on, when we build a new building. I was at the government building yesterday talking to planning, and the question is, how smart is this building if this is your most modern building? When it looks at the ability to put sensors and look at temperature, air conditioning, space management, facility management, it really comes down to that kind of thing. And it comes back to, when we talk about smart in the smart context, which we talked about 2 years ago, if you want to read a good book, it was a book called Abundance, and basically it pokes at the point of we have so much we can do if we just deal with the data that's available to us. In that book, the quote from the author is, if you've got a water problem, you've got a data problem. Leak management, pressure management, and it's throughout all of our systems. So I guess my question is, in closing, sorry for the length of it, in the national energy policy, what are you doing about smart?
Yeah, I think I'll let Louis
get
on that, but before you do,
it was question number 4. It was related to smart, and I apologize for, go ahead.
But I guess the one little portion of it that I can chip in on, I hope planning told you it was a smart building, because it is. It is, and I'm not saying that it's the smartest out there, but it is very, very smart, and it's probably one of the smartest in the Caribbean. I mean, let's put it this way, the old, what we call glass house, the administration building was, I think we're going to be gross, 35,000 square feet, and had a electricity bill of, I think it was about it was something ridiculous, $150,000 a month. We've got a new building that's what, 230,000 square feet, and we're doing about $75,000 a month. And everything in that is smart. I mean, you've got plug and play, you've got, sensors, as you say, the lights turn off. If you decide to go sleep on it, it'll go sleep on you. So, and the air condition is geothermal. So that is it's piped for solar panels in the future. So we've tried to be as smart in that building as possible. Now, how many others are going to come along and try it and do it? I think it's the way to go, actually. Yeah, it's a silver certification on the LEED.
Yeah, in terms, I mean, I'm sure CUC will want to chime in. CUC has implemented an advanced metering infrastructure project. I believe there's 7,000 customers currently that have had their meters changed. That'll help CUC on the demand side, and it'll also help consumers control their usage better. I mean, that's just on the electricity side. I agree on the water side. The non-revenue water here is pretty good, I believe. It's what is it, 18% or? Yeah. So, but you know, nonetheless, I believe there were some recommendations in our subcommittee for smart metering, and you know, on the water side. But on the telecommunications side, I couldn't tell you.
We're almost wrapped up.
If
Mr.
I could
Hugh?
just add, you mentioned earlier that CUC has been promoting energy conservation for a long time. I think we started our formal program in 1992, I think it was. And unfortunately, it really took the fuel price spike 3 years ago, 2008, for people to start paying attention. And unfortunately for many, it's too late, and we deal with customers on a daily basis that frankly today cannot afford the air conditioning bill. And they'll come in, we'll try and help, but the roof isn't insulated, and they don't have the funds to retrofit. And one of the things that I'm very excited about in the national energy policy is a push for minimum standards in terms of insulation. That way people can afford air conditioning. CUC can focus on reliability being the customer satisfaction driver and not so much the price. To help also, we are investing in the smart metering, and what this will do is to give consumers more information so that they're educated and know when and where they're using their energy, so they can help with the conservation. And we're seeing that you know, we'll also be able to offer pay-as-you-go. We do have, by the way, an exhibit set up outside. Some of our customer service staff are there to show you the new smart metering, and also I think the pay-as-you-go option, which we have not launched as yet, but we are getting ready to launch in the future.
Okay. I want to, but we're really pushed for time, so talk fast.
My only question was, we touched on all the development areas, the infrastructure, but we still did not get to the environment of our graveyards and, you know, incinerator or anything like that. And I was just wondering if anyone had any little input we could get on our graveyards, because, I mean, with growth, we know what is going to happen later on. We have incinerator. I have not seen any of the funeral homes with anything for incineration, you know. What's the word again?
Cremation.
Cremation. For cremation or anything else. And I just wondered if any of that is in our infrastructure for the future. That's my only question.
Sure, I'll answer that quickly. Yes, my department is responsible for that aspect as well. And there is a policy document that was developed many years ago, I think probably 2002, 2003. And those were some of the things that were proposed at that time, that we look into national crematoria or arboretum, those where you can. So we look at different options for that. And the other thing that you need to bear in mind is that the cost of land for public cemeteries is another factor. That is becoming less at least in terms of beachland. And just to clarify that, I mean, most of the cemeteries were on the beach years ago simply because it was easier to dig the sand. It's not there for any other reason, and it just continued through the years. But now a lot of that will have to be done inland. But yes, we've looked at that in terms of whether there'll be national cemetery or one national cemetery or 3 national cemeteries and so forth. But yes, it is one area that we are still looking at.
So,
water table is so high here.
For it to be to educate, because one of our things too is older Caymanians tend to hold to the burial thing and
right.
See the growth of a small island like ours. We have to start
It's a culture, yeah.
Yeah, we know it's a cultural thing, and our ministry has a plan for almost anything.
That's right.
And we are going through all of those, and we are, you know, like I said, it's a step, it's a process, and hopefully we can cover them all. But right now we got to wrap it up. We'll next time, hour and a half, I guess.
They can talk to me after that.
Give the panel a round of applause. Thank you very much. Now it's lunchtime. We're a little over schedule, but that's okay. The Developed Talent Room has had their lunch, so there'll be no lines, so it should be great. Lunch is brought to you by the Security Center, so thank them very much. And if you haven't looked around the room here at the different sponsors, please take a chance to look around. Some great exhibits here and also outside in the foyer. Enjoy your lunch.